it turns out that raising your LDL cholesterol in diet does not translate into heart attacks and death. It just doesn't.
When you take cholesterol out of the equation, you go, let's just see if people who eat more saturated fat actually die more. Do they actually get more heart disease? That's what we care about. Forget that it raises cholesterol. We know it raises cholesterol. Let's take that out of the equation and see what the end result is, which is what we care about. And every time they do that, the relationship dissolves. There is no relationship between the amount of fat you eat in your diet and getting heart disease.
We now know that chronic inflammation caused by a diet high in sugar, refined grains, and refined vegetable oils is far more dangerous to our health.
Atherosclerosis is an inflammatory disease. It's not a buildup of fat in the artery, it's actually an inflammation that's causing the problem.
And the cholesterol then will go to that damage to try to repair it, but it didn't cause the damage. The damage has to come first. It's like saying that firefighters caused the fire when they just turned up to put the fire out. It was there by association, but it was there to repair, not to cause harm.
Inflammation is probably the #1 promoter of every disease we don't want to have. And the #1 inflammatory substance in the American diet is sugar. That's it. I mean, you put those two things together, inflammation makes everything worse, and sugar is the #1 inflammatory substance that we consume. End of argument.
When a physician preaches low fat and a physician preaches reducing calories and they try that themselves, it doesn't take long for some of them to realize this isn't working for me. Maybe it's not working for my patients either.
Allie, how are you doing?
Physicians are not immune to obesity. Plenty of them struggle with their own health challenges.
Until 2 years ago, I was trying to do the American Diabetes Association diet, the American Heart Association, trying to eat a low-fat diet, eating small meals throughout the day, and I'm gaining weight.
Up 2, up 3.
I was working out 6 days a week because I would say, I gotta work out. If I wanna lose weight, I wanna be an example to my patients. You're exercising, but like they say, you can't outrun your fork.
I had a huge
Like many docs,
breakdown.
Brian Lenskis was trained in the low-fat paradigm, and that's what he practiced with his patients for decades. But the struggle with his own weight was getting out of control.
Yeah, at that point, I was around 260 pounds. And I was, at that time also, I was pre-diabetic. Clearly what I was doing wasn't working. I was following the government guidelines, and I was getting sicker and sicker. And it's not working for me. Well, were my patients not listening to me, or was I giving them bad advice? And it turns out we were giving bad advice.
Nutrition is actually pretty simple. Your body needs protein, and protein comes first. That's essential. But then you can choose to run your body on carbohydrates, including sugars and starches, or fats, and it's your choice. If you quit eating carbs, sugars, and starches, your body is forced to use an alternative fuel source, fat. Burning fat produces substances called ketones that provide all the energy you need to fuel your body and your brain. That's why the low-carb, high-fat diet has been given the name keto. For most of human history, there's been very little sugar or starches in the diet. In fact, if you put all of human history in 1 year, it's only in the last day that people started eating grains or bread, and it's only in the last hour that people have been eating sugar.
In fact, we know that keeping people in ketosis, keeping the carbs very low, may actually be the preferred way for people to be.
Eventually, I dropped right down 44 pounds, and I went back to my weight that I had when I was rowing in 1972. And I'm glad to say that after 7 years, my blood glucose control is as good as it could be expected for someone of my age of 69. I'm not completely normal, but I'm 99% normal.
Insulin essentially acts as a lock that gets clamped down on all of our fat stores and prevents us from using our stored fat as energy. But when we restrict carbohydrates and we can therefore bring the insulin levels down, the locks come off. And all of a sudden we have access to all of our fat stores for energy.
That's right, insulin is a fat storage hormone. Lower insulin by cutting out sugar and carbs, and the weight comes off, or never comes on in the first place.
We tell patients to think of their body as a bowl of sugar, right? So over time, that bowl fills up. If you're eating a lot of, processed foods and, sugar and so on, that bowl fills up. And eventually that sugar, as you add more sugar in, spills out. And that's what type 2 diabetes is. Your cells can't hold any more sugar. It simply spills out into the blood. The wrong thing to do is take the insulin and keep cramming that sugar back into the body. The body sort of takes it until it rots, right? It would be much smarter to simply say, hey, I have too much sugar. Let me just burn it all off by intermittent fasting or not putting any more sugar in, a low carbohydrate diet.
I've been using the keto diet for about 13 years in a university clinical practice, and the results in treating diabetes are quite remarkable. I've had some people get off insulin within just a few days of changing from eating carbohydrates to not eating carbohydrates. I think my record that I can recall is I took someone off 180 units of insulin a day in just 2 days.
In results from more than 50 controlled clinical trials comparing high-fat and low-fat diets for weight loss, the high-fat diets won every time. The higher the fat, the higher the weight loss. That's because eating fat speeds up your metabolism and helps you burn body fat. Carbs slow down your metabolism and cause weight gain. For many people, fat is a superfood. Not only does it help you feel full and lose weight, your body uses it as the building blocks for cellular membranes, and fat makes up the myelin sheath that forms around your nerves and allows electrical impulses to transmit quickly and efficiently. Fat makes up more than half our brain tissue. Human breast milk is more than half fat, much of which is saturated fat. We need healthy fats to be healthy humans. Unfortunately, what we've been told about which fats are good for us and which fats are bad is dead wrong.
Everybody just thinks, oh, don't eat fat, don't eat fat. And it's actually more tragic than that. The story is actually much worse. As people turned away from saturated fats like butter and animal fats, we were told to eat margarine.
Vegetable oils are a fascinating topic because they've become labeled as heart healthy, which drives me a little crazy because the label was granted to them simply by lowering LDL cholesterol. But the broader question is, what else are they doing? These are not real food products. These are products made in factories. These are products that require heat and chemicals and high pressure to extract what little oil there is.
The heat and chemicals used in the manufacturing process oxidizes these delicate seed oils. When you eat oxidized vegetable oils like soy, canola, corn, and safflower or sunflower, they create free radicals throughout your body that are highly inflammatory and known to cause heart disease and cancer. Why are we always trying to eat more antioxidants? To combat free radicals like the ones found in refined vegetable oils.
And then they're used by restaurants in the most carcinogenic way possible. They heat them, reheat them, cool them off, heat them again, and use them for a week. So switching to vegetable oils or seed oils was probably a terrible idea in the first place.
One researcher from the University of Minnesota went to a variety of fast food restaurants in her neighborhood and purchased French fries, and then took them back to her lab for testing. She found numerous compounds of toxic aldehydes in the fries. Aldehydes are known to cause gene mutation, alter RNA and DNA, and trigger massive inflammation in the body.
Vegetable oil is highly toxic, and anyone who advises people to eat vegetable oils is also giving misinformation.
I tell my clients to avoid the industrial seed oils as much as possible.
Vegetable oils belong in the engines of cars, not in your food. Refined vegetable oils are one more reason you should avoid fast food and processed food. If it comes in a bottle or a box, it probably contains vegetable oils, from crackers to cookies, mayonnaise to salad dressings, baby food, and even baby formula.
They're not natural, they've been shown to be pro-inflammatory, and in some studies like the Minnesota Coronary Experiment, the Sydney Diet Heart Study, they've shown that yes, they lower LDL, but they actually do nothing or they worsen all-cause mortality.
Yeah.
In 2 months, Judy has lost weight and cut her insulin medications by 60%.
I think you have to look inside yourself and just determine that Nobody's going to take care of you the way that you can. I don't feel like anyone could go wrong with making an attempt at this, but you can't attempt it for a week. You have to set your mind and set yourself to it for, a period of time.
Judy is inspired by thousands of other patients who've reversed their type 2 diabetes, getting off all medications with a high-fat, low-carb nutrition plan.
We reversed my severe type 2 diabetes after 1 month. I couldn't be prouder. No more insulin injection for me, and no more metformin or even statins.
I completely reversed my type 2 diabetes in just 3 months. Now, before I changed my diet, I weighed 212 pounds. Now I weigh 165 pounds and I take 0 medications.
Before I started, I weighed about 265 pounds. I now weigh 130 pounds. Now I can enjoy my family. I can do everything that you should do to live a life. It's just been a total change.
I have seen so many individual transformative patients. What an honor that is to share that journey with a patient.
I feel like if a person just is determined and sets their goals, that there isn't anything you can't do. You just have to decide that feeling good and being healthy is more important than the things you used to like to eat. It isn't very long before your tastes change and you really like it.
When I first started exploring low carb, I tried to keep it very quiet because it has been, and maybe still is, a very controversial subject. In other countries, dietitians were losing their licensure over practicing low carb, let alone medical doctors as well.
Professor Noakes, on a charge of unprofessional conduct, the majority of this committee find you not guilty.
The controversy over low carb may be slowly, quietly changing. In the long drawn-out case of Dr. Tim Noakes, the final ruling found in his favor.
So as far as we're concerned, we've made the point that this diet is safe. That's all we really set out to do.
The low-carb ketogenic diet is a low-inflammation diet.
More and more brave practitioners are going against the dietary guidelines to help their patients find better health. Like Brian Lenskis, who also teaches low-carb nutrition classes at his church. So far, Brian's congregation has lost more than 2,000 pounds.
Our results are in purple here, low carb.
The 2-year findings from Sarah Hallberg's clinical trial show that a low-carb, high-fat diet is equally as effective as bariatric surgery in reversing type 2 diabetes.
So your assessment of the vilification of saturated fat after your experience in this trial?
Well, I'll tell you, what we say is that we do not restrict saturated fat in these patients, and yet they're having these remarkable results.
In April of 2019, the American Diabetes Association issued an update to its long-standing position that diets lower than 130 grams of carbs a day are unsafe.
I was thrilled. It felt like Christmas morning to me. It was the very first time in writing from a huge organization that said what I was doing was okay. What I was doing was an approach that was helping my patients. And while it was something that I have known for years, it was the first time I felt safe. It was the first time I felt safe to give these recommendations.
In 2015, after more than 50 years of condemning foods like eggs, lobster, and shrimp, the American Heart Association quietly dropped their long-standing recommendation against dietary cholesterol, saying it's no longer a nutrient of concern. That same year, the U.S. Dietary Guidelines Committee removed the cap on dietary fat consumption, admitting there's no evidence that eating fat is bad for health. But the cap on saturated fat remains.
The hypothesis that saturated fats are bad for health has been the most tested hypothesis in the history of nutrition science. There has been no hypothesis that has been more tested. Some 75,000 people, 65,000, somewhere in that range, depending on which studies you include, and none of them could show that saturated fats had any effect on total or cardiovascular mortality. There's no evidence for it.
Even so, the American Heart Association, who takes much of its funding from big food and big pharma, continues to stand behind its long-held position that saturated fats are the cause of heart disease and that refined vegetable oils are heart healthy.
But there is so much politics and so much money, and big pharma and the sugar industry behind trying to keep those guidelines as they are right now. I feel like eventually they will change, but when? It could be 50 years. We can't wait 50 years. Millions of people have died already because of this mess.
Doug Reynolds isn't waiting any longer. His company, Low Carb USA, is partnering with dozens of physicians, nutritionists, and dietitians to create a set of global clinical guidelines that teach medical professionals how to safely and effectively practice low-carb nutrition.
That gives a lot of them confidence to maybe start implementing it in their practice, where before they weren't quite sure how to do it, or they were afraid that the other doctors weren't doing it. Now they're actually following some kind of set of guidelines.
Recommending a single dietary pattern to an entire population was a huge mistake. Not only did the low-fat diet not work, it did us harm and resulted in greater obesity and disease. The lesson of the low-fat diet may be that nutrition science is deeply flawed, and our nation's dietary guidelines have been heavily influenced by the food industry and the enormous amount of money at stake.
What we are living now is just so completely unsustainable. These unsustainable rates of obesity and diabetes, we're bankrupting our nation. It's destroying people's lives, it's destroying our country, and it has to stop.
We are not treating the disease, we're treating the symptoms of the disease. And so it should be of no surprise to anyone that we're not getting better. And we're not going to get better until we recognize what the real problem is. If we changed the food, we could solve this problem.
The people at the top are not going to change. So we have to get this going as a bottom-up revolution and get more and more people on board until they're shamed into changing their guidelines, because the swell of the population is just ignoring them.
The change is coming from the people because they've changed. They are forcing the doctors to change. If we can change the medical profession, I think we'll do something.
If you're pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic, there is a way out, a path forward to health and vitality, to fewer drugs and more energy. You can get your life back, and all you have to do is eat real food.